How's it going, YouTube and my future self? It is Will back with another video, and sorry that my voice is a little raspy. I'm a little under the weather, but today I wanted to make almost the 6-month recap of me living in London, United Kingdom, and England after moving from America to pursue a work opportunity in Europe. So I wanted to kind of sit down, talk about some of my thoughts and experiences thus far, go through each of the months of some of the fun adventures that I've been on, as I've been able to do a ton since coming over here. Really has kind of opened my eyes to a whole nother world, a way of working, people, etc., and lots of fun stuff like that. So this is kind of the 5 months check-in. I haven't uploaded on this channel in quite a while, as I've been super busy with work. Kind of fell out of love of making the YouTube videos and other things like that, and so just kind of felt that fire and passion to kind of get something out there for myself, for my family and my friends, to kind of see what's going on with me and to kind of document everything that's kind of happened over the past couple months, because it's been a lot. Life has changed quite a bit. So I guess most recently, a little bit of the check-in. A couple months ago I turned 24, so on the 24th year of age in my life, and has been a very full life of all sorts of different stuff going on. But kind of a little bit of the reason for moving out here, I'm not sure if I even mentioned it on this channel, but I was offered the kind of an opportunity to lead finance for Europe temporarily, while backfilling for someone who's currently on maternity leave for Amazon Leo, which is Amazon's low Earth orbit satellite broadband service that's going to be releasing sometime in the future. And I've been working on Amazon Leo for about 2 years now. It was originally under Project Kuiper, doing a bunch of finance for that work-wise, with kind of total investment analysis and headcount OPEX budgeting, and kind of the creation of all sorts of programs and processes that didn't exist before. And then did a really good job doing all of that stuff, and was kind of offered the opportunity to move to Europe, take an international finance role, and kind of help a team through their big operational planning while their main finance person's out of office for maternity leave. And so big opportunity for me, massive display of trust to kind of move me out here and get a whole new experience, different team, different culture, working at a level that's a lot, much higher than my age and experience kind of would typically allow. And so super exciting, but also kind of nerve-wracking experience to be chosen to kind of do that. And the way it came up was kind of in a career conversation where someone important kind of offered the ability for me to switch my skill set of what I was doing, kind of build out this different way of working with people, getting much closer to a strategic finance role in partnership with a business team, as opposed to what I kind of previously been doing, which is a lot more of like internal finance work. And so they kind of offered the ability to kind of go wherever kind of suited my interest, and one of those roles was international finance. And through playing Pokemon when I was younger and getting exposed to travel when I was really young, the idea of living abroad kind of always interests me. And being offered that position, when I was 23, it came at a time that was a lot sooner than I anticipated being able to do something like that. And, the main reason I didn't want to take it was because I had a really fantastic relationship with my previous manager / mentor, longtime mentor. But, for all the other reasons as to why it would, be a good idea to take that position when I did, there really wasn't a lot holding me to, working in America as an exclusive thing. And there was a lot more to be gained and a lot more to experience, in kind of a extraordinary way of living life that I thought would be super interesting if I kind of took it all and moved to overseas to kind of try something new and kind of throw myself in the deep end when it comes to comfort. So sorry that I'm kind of sweating. One of the big adjustments since moving to Europe is the lack of air conditioning. And so as a kind of bigger boy, the heat can be a lot. So I live on a pretty busy street. Otherwise I would open the window and let in some air, but I want to make sure the audio is okay. So yeah, in kind of had a couple months to kind of stew on that idea, then ended up going forward with it and making the decision in October of 2025. Took a couple months to kind of finalize everything. There were some internal changes that kind of delayed the process, plus getting a visa and all that stuff. But in February of 2026, the process moved super quick. Applied for the visa, got it within a couple days. All of a sudden, needed to kind of move out there and start work in London. And so, funny enough, the flat that I currently live in, I found on Spare Room, which is kind of like a Craigslist equivalent of here in the UK, and was able to find a flat within 3 days. There's not a whole lot of official credit check or anything processes like that. I just kind of had to show my visa with some funds, as opposed to America where there's like a lot of lengthy processes to sign up for an apartment. And so 3 days later I moved to Shoreditch, London, kind of an up and coming area where it's kind of close to the Amazon office here, and very close to Spitalfields Market. Really cool area with lots of shops and stuff, and moved into a nice flat at a great rate, super close to where I work, and moved in with 3 wonderful Italian flatmates who have kind of welcomed me into their home and been super kind and hospitable since I've been living here for about 5 months. So officially move-in date was March 1st. Kind of been about almost 5.5 months since then, as it's now August 17th, and so almost at the 6-month mark. But it's been quite the journey, and have learned a lot about myself and about world and kind of traveling and work and all sorts of stuff. So with that, let me take a sip of the soda, and then we will move into the monthly recap. Okay, so I think the first thing is like month 1. It's kind of bright lights and bright stars. There's a lot of things that are similar between the US and England in terms of the way people talk and the way you get around, and there's nothing too crazy from a adjustment perspective from my opinion. I'm a pretty adaptable person, and so kind of showed up, moved in on a Sunday and went straight to work on Monday. And so there wasn't really a whole lot of time for me to kind of think about adjusting into the city. It just kind of happened, was kind of, straight to the job, and kind of went from there. The first week or 2 weeks of me being here was a lot of late nights on a very specific work project that just kind of came out of nowhere. And so really I didn't have a whole lot of time to like think about anything other than just like going to work, coming home, sleeping, and then kind of getting into a routine that way. And so I think, some of the normal like new things that were kind of different from America was obviously the currency being in pounds as opposed to dollars. The team that I work with very actively invites people to go to lunch with them and kind of is very sociable, where I feel like in American working culture it's a little bit more transactional, or kind of people eat at their desk. There's like a lot more of like a grind culture where it's like every person for themselves, where I feel like here in Europe, working for Amazon, I think a lot of that is still consistent in that, it's not like people are just leaving the office at 3:00 to go to the pub or anything, but there definitely is a sense of community, and that people like really like working together and collaborating and then going to lunch together, and kind of, I think I got really lucky with the team that I'm on and the team that I'm supporting. And so feeling that kind of cultural shift is a welcome change, for sure. People, seem to really care about my well-being and kind of making sure that I'm not overworking, but I also kind of have that drive in me to kind of get things done at all costs and to learn. So there was a little bit of an adjustment kind of early on of me working super late, kind of sticking to the schedule I was used to, and then kind of adjusting to folks asking me why I was working so late, or like why I wasn't doing anything on the weekends and stuff like that. But then, I think one of the misconceptions that I kind of learned very fast about England is, people, I feel like in America, are pretty critical of the food scene here, myself included, prior to moving here, as I had visited London a few times for both work trips and Pokemon tournaments when I was younger. And when you think of food in London, you think of kind of like fish and chips or Sunday roast or like meat pies, sausage rolls, things like that. But London is quite a diverse city, and so there's food from all over the world. Many markets where you can find, Nigerian food and Ethiopian food and Chinese food and Asian food and French and German and like pretty much everything. So, I think culture shock was the food is really, really phenomenal. It kind of reminds me of how New York was, with all the things that you could kind of go out and try, and always like be adventurous with food of any level, because you have cheaper restaurants and then you also have super, super expensive restaurants. I think as well the people and the diversity of London is quite amazing, in that people in London are from all over the place. Very, very diverse, and kind of, similar to New York in that it's like a melting pot of people from all over the place. But the main difference that I see between New York and London is that in New York, a lot of people are from America, and then ethnically different or diverse. Whereas in London, a lot of people are actually from these other countries that are kind of coming here and seeking opportunity, as it's kind of like the capital that you would go to in Europe, or, even just generally as a way to pursue opportunity. And so I've met people from all over the place, whether that's Nepal or Saudi Arabia or Hong Kong or India, just like all over the place. And so I have a lot of coworkers from different places all over the world. I have learned a ton about different cultures and kind of meeting, people from all over the place, really interesting conversations, people that have tons of different backgrounds, expats, all sorts of stuff. So been really, really, really eye-opening from like a cultural perspective of, there's a lot of diversity and excitement that's happening outside of the U.S. in this city of London. That's kind of amazing. Then I think, the subway system or the tube system here is super impressive, as you're able to kind of get around all over the place. I would say it is a bit older than, say, Washington, D.C., for example, where like the metro system's super modern and relatively clean, where here you do kind of have varying levels of cleanliness or heating and air conditioning and stuff like that. But generally, super reliable. The trains come on time all the time, and there's delays. But I would say transit-wise, it's kind of really impressive how, you don't need a car, just like you don't need a car in most U.S. cities. But there's also like really long-haul trains that go to France or that go to different parts of the U.K. And they're not super cheap, but you can pretty much get around without a car. I think another really eye-opening thing, which will kind of segue us into our month-by-month storytelling, is how cheap travel is generally. There's companies called Ryanair, Wizz Air, EasyJet that are all kind of similar to like, RIP Spirit or Frontier in the US, where you can kind of no frills, no extras, take a backpack and go travel somewhere. But the main difference is that the flights to some of these countries, whether that's Slovakia or Poland or Hungary or France or like any of these places, are like 40 pounds, which, is probably $56 or so, guessing. And so you can kind of do this wonderful fly out Friday night after work, come back Sunday night if you have the kind of the means to do so. And so that I definitely have taken advantage of that. I've been to 11 different countries since moving here and have absolutely fallen in love with the prices of travel and kind of being able to go see the world from London, since it has so many different flights from so many different airports all over the place. And then I think one of the things that was kind of a big awakening, both moving here and kind of taking a salary cut as my pay was adjusted to local market rates, but also kind of meeting people that are my age, is America has a very different relationship with money than I think most other countries do, and other countries get paid less than America in all sorts of fields. And so it's been quite interesting to kind of hear people coming out of college and seeking, a 40,000 pound salary, whereas the expectation of most of my friends that were graduating college in the U.S. is to try and shoot for $100,000 starting salary, job. And so kind of being in a different place in the world and seeing how people culturally respond to job security and economics and stuff like that has been super fascinating. And kind of you can extrapolate that to all sorts of different countries as as you go into more like Central Eastern Europe countries, the relationship, the currency is different. People get paid even less. And so like even though these are nations that have tons of people and are developing and contributing to the society, it's just like completely different than America. And having met some people here that are trying to work in finance, a lot of the reason for that is America is where all the money's at. And so even in the venture capital space or stuff like that, most people are trying to get funding from America, whereas within Europe it's a bit harder to do that at the scale that you would kind of want it to. So I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about emerging markets and talent and people and kind of diversity of where people are all around the world. It's been something I've kind of thought quite a lot about, and it's been really eye-opening experience kind of moving somewhere else and being integrated into a culture where that stuff is, kind of treated very differently than it is in the US. So those are some of the high level thoughts of things that I can kind of come up off the brain. I think in terms of the people here are super friendly. I think, generally some a little bit more reserved than others, as it takes a while to kind of get folks to open up. So there's a lot of kind of small talk in the hallways about the weather and, football matches and stuff like that. But I think one of the really, really great things about being in London is I've met tons of people who are always open to, stay out late or do fun stuff. And so I think my social life has kind of changed dramatically in that there's always something to do in London, kind of similar to New York. And I've met a great group of folks who kind of are always up for doing something adventurous and something fun. And, you have the pubs in this kind of culture of having third spaces where people after work will go to a pub and socialize or, hang out. Whereas I feel like in America, you don't always have that, or the way that you would treat a bar or something similar is not as not as casual as the way that people in the UK treat the pub, which is kind of just like a place to hang out and get a drink and socialize. And so even though I don't drink alcohol, no problem going to a pub and having a Coke Zero and enjoying the time with some people. So let's see. So the first month that I was here, kind of spoke to some of those original big things that I kind of noticed. But like I said, first couple of weeks were just work. In fact, the second week that I was actually in London, I was asked to go back to Seattle, as I'm a bit of like an AI specialist in the company I work for. And so I was asked to go back and lead a hackathon, kind of getting 6 other finance people and kind of trying to build a web application for an idea that I had, which was a lot of fun. It kind of showed me more of that kind of driving force of what I thought was true kind of the whole time, of just AI kind of completely changing the way that finance professionals work in the world. And so we were able to build a pretty cool app doing that as like a prototype, and always a good time to go back to Seattle and see friends and visit people that are out there. But work week 1, then into kind of Seattle trip week 2. And, early on in the first couple weeks, I made a really great friend who, once we kind of figured out that we were the same age, we got along, we had a lot of stuff in common. We ended up kind of hanging out together a bit. And then she ended up introducing me to a bunch of my current friends now, and it was like this, very social, bubbly person that kind of got all these people together, and was just like an absolute joy to be around. This person ended up becoming my girlfriend, and so I am super, super lucky to have a, amazing, beautiful, ambitious, passionate, generous, kind, loving girlfriend that I met, kind of early in my days out here in London. So thankful to have her in my life as my partner, and really excited for the future with her, because I think she's an amazing woman, and I'm super lucky. But my current girlfriend at the time, my friend, really kind of helped me adjust to living in London. Really built out my social circle with someone who I could go and talk to and kind of learn all sorts of stuff from. And so like that first month was kind of really critical for me, of just like meeting her and kind of getting adjusted to the working culture, and kind of had a bunch of big projects that I was kind of taking on. A lot of the work was all net new and scary, and that kind of fear of imposter syndrome of kind of being thrown to the deep end and hoping that it works out. So that the first month was just like getting adjusted, like everything kind of hitting all at once. And so, if I hadn't met my girlfriend at the time, probably would have been a lot harder. So a huge thank you to her for kind of being an amazing, friend and soul. And then I'm super happy to now have her as my girlfriend. So that's kind of the most, significant thing of month 1, is just meeting a friend group and kind of getting out there and doing new things. Went bouldering for the first time, thanks to my girlfriend, who kind of introduced me to doing that. Had some pub nights, discovered the Weatherspoons, JD Weatherspoons culture, and met some wonderful friends as well through that experience, who I've then, traveled with or other stuff like that. And so some of the names out there, Louise, my wonderful girlfriend, and then Charlie and Sharvash, and Alex, and many other folks that I kind of met through that experience. And so then it's kind of at the end of month 1, I ended up going to the first city outside of London in the UK that I've ever been to. And so Luis and a mutual friend of ours went to a city called Brighton, which is like a seaside town outside of London by about an hour train. Accidentally ended up staying in Seven Sisters, which is like a hike that people do out here in a beautiful kind of seaside town that was really, really cute. Stayed in an Airbnb out there, and it was really nice to kind of get outside of London and experience a completely different side of the UK. There's sheep grazing on the hills, gorgeous scenery, and then of course I'm always picking up on things that people do differently here. And so one of my favorite stories of this experience is going on a run in a tank top, walking into a coffee shop, completely drenched in sweat, even more than I am currently. And standing in line for the person behind the counter to ask me, are you all right? And so in my head, I was assuming she's like, well, look at this goof in a tank top when everyone in here is dressed in their nice like Sunday clothes. And so I was like, yeah, sorry, don't mean to be informal, just went on a run, wanted to grab a coffee. But that's just a greeting of expression that asks, how are you here? Because I then noticed she kept saying that to everyone, and ever since I've noticed are you all right is more synonymous with how are you doing, and not the sarcastic way that Americans would say, are you all right? As in like, we know you're not all right, and we're just clarifying or asking the rhetorical question. So that was a fun time. Spent some time out there, and while I was there, I ended up going and kind of saying, well, I've been here for a while. I've got my friends here. Now it's time to kind of really lean into what I wanted to do when I moved here, which is start to travel. And, one of the wonderful things about London and being closer to Europe is kind of having this ability to go travel to a bunch of countries that from America would be extremely expensive to do otherwise. And so that weekend, after talking to Luis and my mutual friend, I ended up booking a trip to Slovakia. I went on Skyscanner, which is an app out here that kind of shows you the cheapest flights, and for £40 round trip was able to get a flight to Slovakia, on Easter weekend. And in the UK, you get 2 days off for Easter, as opposed to the US, you get none. And so I was able to do a little 4-day trip to Slovakia and then Austria. And so funny enough, I told a coworker of mine that I was doing this, little to find out he's actually lived in Bratislava, Slovakia for about 3 years. And he was like, you could choose any country in Europe to go to. And for some reason, you decided to choose Slovakia, which is absolutely not the country that you should have chose. Why would you go there? And so I told him, well, if I was in DC, this would be super expensive, and I don't know anything about the country, so I think it'd be kind of fun. And he's like, no, scratch that. If you can't cancel, instantly buy a bus ticket to go to Wien, which is Vienna in, I'm assuming Austrian, and take the bus and go there instead. Don't even go to Bratislava. And so I didn't follow all of his advice, but I did end up kind of doing both. And so I went to Slovakia and walked around Bratislava. It's a small capital city, tried some amazing food, ended up meeting a man from Prague who kind of accompanied me on my journey on the first day, kind of a fellow solo traveler that I walked up to and kind of asked what he was up to and if he'd be interested in walking around. So learned a lot about the Czech Republic and Slovakia and the history there, and kind of all of this stuff about his life and where he's from and kind of what he does for work and in school. And had some amazing food, went to the Slovak pub, which is a place in Slovakia that has amazing goat cheese dumplings, and I tried all sorts of different foods that, I had never heard of before. And so big thanks to my coworker, Roberto, for kind of showing me all of these things and giving me all these recommendations. And then the next day, took a bus for 12 euros to Austria and spent 24 hours in Austria, just one night overnight. In gorgeous city, walked around, just in awe of the architecture and the museums, tried Wiener Schnitzel, and, Austrian breakfast and other things like that. And it was just absolutely gorgeous city. And that one kind of was taking the time to just solo travel, didn't really meet anyone, but took a lot of pictures and did all the sights and things. And then, headed back to Slovakia for kind of the last 36 hours or so, where I saw a Slovak hockey game between the main two cities in Slovakia, one of them being Bratislava, the other one being Kolsik, I think is how you say it. And the energy in there was absolutely crazy. People are banging on drums and people are, chanting and all this stuff. I ended up sitting next to a super famous MMA fighter just by nature of randomness, and all these people kept coming up to him and kind of taking pictures of him, and it was really, really incredible to kind of be in that energy and experience, which was a ton of fun. So Slovakia and Austria were the first two countries that I went to, kind of starting off strong in month 2 in April, the first week, and then after doing that, kind of realized, wait a second, this is pretty cool. And actually, let me plug in my camera because I think it's gonna die. Oh, whole setup is falling apart here. There we go. All right, fixed that. Hopefully that works. So kind of realized, that was pretty easy. I'd love to kind of keep doing that. So ended up booking a trip to Prague to go see Robin, who I had met in Slovakia, and then also booked a trip to Hungary, as a friend of mine from the US, Summer, was coming out to go there. So the next two countries were there. And so within April, went to 4 different countries. In Prague, it was also a Pokemon Regional Championships where I got to kind of hang out with some of my older friends from the US and from Europe that I had kind of lost touch with, and so ended up spending a bunch of time with the best Pokemon player in the world and one of the coolest people in the Pokemon community, who owns one of the biggest websites called Limitless TCG. Very funny. I had kind of got off a flight from Hungary, got to Prague at like 8 a.m., couldn't check into my hotel, and so was just walking around the city center, ran into Robin by complete accident, and then we ended up kind of spending the whole weekend together, and it was a lot of fun. In Hungary, spent time with Summer, worked from the Amazon office there, and had a really great time experiencing a completely different culture. A lot of similarities in food to Slovakia, but this time the introduction of paprika was kind of everywhere. And Budapest, being kind of the capital of like the Austria-Hungarian Empire, was like an absolutely majestic city, super gorgeous. At night, just looking at the architecture with the lights was just eye-opening. And so that was month 2 from a travel perspective. Ended up celebrating my 24th birthday. My wonderful girlfriend surprised kind of created a surprise party for me. This was prior to us dating. But planned a wonderful night out in London, where we went to kind of like a bar area with all these different people that I had met since moving to London. And then we went to Dishoom, which is Indian food is my favorite food, and so we celebrated with a great meal there. And then we ended the night with karaoke, which is something that I told Luis I was interested in doing, and was absolutely thrilled and had a great time doing that with a bunch of people that I had met. So super, super great experiences and absolutely wonderful time in month 2. And then, through the work stuff, I think I started to learn to trust my intuition a bit more. Moving here, I was kind of, while having all this fun, doing all this stuff, I was kind of struggling with the balance between going super, super deep on everything, as I kind of learned this work style from my previous manager of like, you got to work super, super hard on everything and go super, super detail oriented and all this stuff. But the job that I had taken just simply doesn't allow for that, and that the speed of which people need information is a lot different. The expectation of the quality of that information is different, and it's a very scrappy, startup-y kind of experience. And so I started to be pushed by my management team and the business team that I was supporting to kind of lean more on my intuition, as opposed to trying to use numbers to prove everything. And so having worked on this business for 2 years at this point, really kind of wrapping my head around, okay, I know how all this stuff is working in and out. I can kind of take quick, educated guesses about different things, as opposed to always having to go super detail oriented on everything. And that really kind of developed my ability to influence in a completely different way from a finance perspective. And so over those first couple of months, I learned a lot about kind of being like a strategic partner to someone, as opposed to just being like an analyst, and then really kind of creating my own voice and then kind of helping influence how things get done. And also, made some mistakes of that. There were some things that I saw that I kind of had a really strong opinion about, and then didn't voice it when it mattered after having the conversation with my manager about, hey, I saw this thing, should I have voiced it? More from like a, profitability perspective. They ended up being like, yeah, you probably should have said that. Kind of reaffirm something that I've run into many times throughout my career, which is you really need to trust your intuition and just speak if you have something to say, especially if you're uncertain, because you end up being right if you kind of develop that muscle over time. And so since then, I've become a lot more vocal. When I see things or kind of don't understand something, I'll just question it. And it's been very helpful, both professionally and also personally, of like kind of getting my mind out there and kind of speaking generally. So that was good. Then month 3, I ended up traveling to Poland and Malta. Poland the first week of May. Kind of continuing the theme of like the spontaneity, just wanted to go travel on another trip, and I think there was a bank holiday on that Monday or something, so it was like a good opportunity to kind of go travel again. Cheap flight, first time staying in like a private dorm hostel. I ended up staying in a actual hostel later on in a different country, but met another amazing friend as well on this trip. It was like midnight time. We sat on a bus, headed to the Warsaw city center, sat next to a woman from Kazakhstan, currently living in Russia, and, struck up a conversation, had a great chat, ended up kind of switching my entire itinerary from originally planning to just be in Warsaw for the weekend to then her inviting me to come to Krakow to meet some of her friends and hang out with them. And so ended up doing both Warsaw and Krakow over one weekend, took a 3.5-hour bus from Warsaw to Krakow to kind of hang out. And so it was absolutely amazing experience. A huge thank you to Diana for kind of inviting me into her friend group and kind of joining me for a wonderful weekend exploring Poland together. Learned a lot about living in Russia and kind of her upbringing and the way that things are different. And so a common theme from all this stuff is just that constant reminder that people are from all over the place and have different perspectives and all this stuff, and your experiences and how you grow up shape the way you think, and the things that you see in the news are not always representative of how people actually live their lives. And so it's been an amazing experience kind of getting to meet people from all of these different places that you don't necessarily interact with on a day-to-day basis, at least in the US on a regular basis. Then I wanted to kind of take a goal and host some dinner parties. It was something that I kind of started doing in DC with some of my friends. So in May, hosted my first fourth Friday or final Friday, which was kind of a get-together where I started inviting a bunch of friends to kind of come and hang out with Luis and I, and do like a little bar activity and then a dinner and then a social activity at the end, kind of copying the format Luis had created for my birthday. So we did that twice, and it was a great fun experience, and kind of was a really good way to kind of keep something at the end of the month to keep both existing friends and new friends in the loop and kind of socialize, and it was great. Looking to kind of do that again here in the future. Just kind of got busy over the past couple months, so that was a lot of fun. And then through May, started kind of the 10-year financial planning for Europe, which was like the big part of the role and the reason that I got hired out here. And so, basically forecasting, profit and loss statements and kind of business strategy for every country in Europe across many different business models, all for this, massive project that we've got going on. And so big challenge, worked super hard on it, but a lot of the experience that I've kind of gained over the years working in finance has kind of helped me do that. And so I've come a long way from, working at McDonald's or running the Pokemon card business in the parents' basement or even working at the warehouses in Amazon. And so massive change of just like felt like a huge accomplishment professionally to kind of do something of that magnitude. And lead this massive forecasting project. So wonderful experience, massive way of earning trust, and did a great job doing that. And so got really positive feedback on how all that went. So super happy with all of that. And May kind of started that process, and then it ended up closing more recently in August and July. But in month 4, ended up traveling to 2 other countries. In June, went to Croatia with some friends of mine from the US. beautiful country, you know, really, really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, kind of was closing out some of that big financial plan and stuff that I talked about, and so had to work for most of the trip, but that was more just unlucky timing of I had kind of planned to go to Croatia before I even moved here. Didn't even know what the schedule was going to be. And then I went to Scotland and, you know, had a great time there as well. That was the first time that I stayed in a hostel. And so, you know, the first hostel was like 17 pounds in Glasgow, and completely great. Super, super fun. You know, it felt good to not pay an arm and a leg to just stay somewhere for a night. And since, you know, you're traveling and want to explore, you don't necessarily want to spend all your time in like the hotel that you paid for. So the hostel was great. The second night paid 3 times as much, and people were snoring and rattling the bed and all that stuff. And so it was a fun little experience. But, you know, very pro hostel. I think if you're a young person and you want to kind of get out there and see the world, don't be afraid of hostels. You know, beggars can't be choosers on the affordability front, but I think it's an excellent way to kind of seek discomfort. You can meet people through hostels and all that stuff, and I highly recommend it to folks that are solo traveling, because I think it's a great way to kind of meet people and get out there for an affordable way if you don't know people there. Then also went to Oxford with Luis. You know, kind of wonderful to walk around the beautiful Oxford college campus and surrounding area. You know, my IQ probably increased by a point or so, which was fun. But that was like a wonderful little trip, kind of getting us out there and seeing more of the UK. You know, very fun to kind of see how different people within the UK live, as it's you know, London is completely different from some of the other cities that are out there, and so that's always super fun. And then in month 5, traveled to 2 other countries. Went to Portugal and Belgium. In Belgium, I met up with one of my previous roommates who was there playing Magic, the Gathering, and it was good to kind of see him and hear about how life is going and just hang out with him. And, you know, Portugal, went there with Luis and had a great time in all these different theme parks and kind of trying different food and bougie restaurants and stuff like that. So really enjoyed Portugal. Definitely a place I'd like to go back to and check out Lisbon and Porto as we went to Faro. And then month 6 ended up you know, currently in July, August. You know, I'm prepping for a massive trip, as I'm the best man for a friend of mine's wedding in Japan. So I'm going to be in Asia for 3 weeks, both in Japan and also in China, going to Beijing and Shanghai. So lots of travel on the docket. I also just got back from Ireland with 2 of my friends, you know, starting to build out those local friendships here, and had a really good time with Alex and Charlie. But, you know, the other big important milestone was meeting my girlfriend's parents, and that was a ton of fun, kind of getting to explore her hometown and the things that make her special and unique, and all of that wonderful stuff. So it's been a amazing 6 months with tons of challenges, tons of opportunity, tons of fun. But, you know, wanted to kind of make this video and get it out there, document the experiences, and I'm sure I'll make kind of more videos about the experiences a little bit more in depth, maybe when I'm a little less sweaty. But yeah, wanted to kind of get that out there. So thanks for watching if you made it this far. Super appreciate all the support from friends and family along the way. I miss you all, miss America, and looking forward to coming back home for Thanksgiving. And you know, life is good, all is great. Super, super fortunate, super blessed to kind of have this opportunity to be out here. And so to any of my friends or to anyone considering doing an international move abroad, I 100% absolutely recommend it. Zero regrets. One of probably the best decisions I've ever made in my life. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. See you guys.